At 67 years old, I sold my husband our family restaurant for $1. Everyone thought I'd lost my mind. My daughter cried. My best friend stopped speaking to me. But when the health inspector walked through those kitchen doors 3 weeks later, my husband finally understood what I'd known for months. I'm glad you're here with me today. Rita, and now have Rita. Please like this video and listen to my story until the very end, and tell me in the comments which city you're listening from. I want to see how far my voice can travel. My husband and I opened our restaurant in 1986. A little place on Main Street in Savannah, Georgia. We called it Helen and Frank's because that's who we were, Helen and Frank. Partners in everything. I did the cooking, the menu planning, the ordering. He handled the front of house, the finances, the suppliers. For 38 years, we built that restaurant into something the whole town knew. We had regulars who'd been eating with us since opening day. We had a waitress, Donna, who'd worked for us for 22 years. Our peach cobbler was famous 3 counties over. I thought we'd grow old together behind that counter, handing the place down to our kids someday. But I was wrong about a lot of things. It started when Frank turned 65. He said he wanted to modernize the restaurant. New menu? New decor? New image? I thought he meant updating the wallpaper. Maybe adding some vegetarian options. Instead, he hired a restaurant consultant. Her name was Vanessa. She was 31 years old with a degree in hospitality management and a smile that made my stomach turn the first time I saw it. Vanessa had ideas about everything. The menu was too old-fashioned. The decor was outdated. The recipes needed to be elevated. She convinced Frank to spend $40,000 on renovations I never agreed to. New lighting, new furniture, a bar area we didn't need. But Frank was enchanted. Suddenly, he was staying late for planning meetings with Vanessa. He started wearing cologne to work, something he hadn't done in 20 years. He got a new phone and kept it face down on every surface. "Frank, what's going on with you and this consultant?" I asked one night after closing. He didn't even look up from his phone. "She's helping us grow the business, Helen." I wasn't paranoid. I was observant. There's a difference. The credit card statements told me everything. Dinners at restaurants in Charleston, an hour and a half away. A weekend at a resort in Hilton Head when he told me he was at a food industry conference. A jewelry charge for $800 that never appeared on my wrist or around my neck. I confronted him on a Wednesday evening. We were cleaning up after the dinner service. I placed the credit card statements on the stainless steel prep counter between us. "Who is she to you, Frank?" He looked at the papers, then at me. His expression didn't change. It just went flat, like someone had switched off a light behind his eyes. "I want a divorce," he said. "I've already talked to a lawyer, 38 years. Dismissed between the dishwasher and the walk-in cooler." "And the restaurant?" I asked. "It's in my name. Helen, it's always been in my name. You were the cook. I was the owner. My lawyer says you'll get a fair settlement, but the restaurant stays with me." Fair. That word again. Funny how the person holding all the cards always thinks they're being fair. His lawyer sent the papers the following week. The offer was insulting. $60,000 and our older car, the one with 140,000 miles on it, that was his idea of 38 years of partnership. The restaurant was valued at $1.8 million. The house was worth $600,000, both in his name. He'd been very deliberate about that over the decades. I sat in my lawyer's office, a kind woman named Patricia Owens, and listened to her explain my options. "Mrs. Dalton, the challenge is that the restaurant and the house are legally in his name. Georgia is an equitable distribution state, so you're entitled to a fair share, but proving your exact contribution after all these years could be a long and expensive process. What if I don't fight? I asked. She stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. What if I sell him my claim to everything for $1? Mrs. Dalton, I strongly advise against any such action. You'd be giving up potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars, but I was already thinking about something else. Something I'd discovered 2 weeks earlier while looking for our old tax returns in the filing cabinet Frank never touched. Draw up the papers, I said. I want to sell him my interest in everything. The restaurant, the house, all of it. For what teared it? For $1. Patricia tried to talk me out of it for 45 minutes. She thought I was having a breakdown. Maybe I was. But I signed those papers with steady hands and a clear mind. When Frank's lawyer received the signed documents, I'm told he actually laughed, called his partner into his office to show her. They probably thought I was the stupidest woman in Georgia. I drove home to the small apartment I'd rented near the river. 1 bedroom, a tiny kitchen that would have fit inside our restaurant's pantry. I sat on the second-hand couch and allowed myself exactly 10 minutes of panic. Then I opened the folder I'd been keeping in my nightstand for 2 weeks and read through its contents again. See, Frank had made a mistake. Several mistakes, actually. The biggest one was assuming I never paid attention to the business side of things. I was the cook, after all. What would I know about finances? But I'd done the restaurant's bookkeeping for the first 19 years. I'd signed checks, filed taxes, negotiated with vendors, and I kept copies of everything. Every receipt, every contract, every tax return. Frank used to joke about it. Helen's Paper Museum, he called it. Every scrap of paper since the Reagan administration. He wasn't laughing now. He just didn't know it yet. What I'd found in that filing cabinet was a stack of health department correspondence from the past 3 years. Violations that Frank had been hiding from me. 14 citations for improper food storage. Inadequate refrigeration temperatures. Pest control failures. And expired ingredient usage. He'd been paying fines quietly, using business funds, and never fixing the underlying problems. He'd also been cutting corners on food costs for years, buying from unlicensed suppliers to save money, pocketing the difference between what he told me ingredients cost and what he actually paid. But that wasn't all. Mixed in with those documents, I found invoices from a company called Vanco Consulting LLC. Payments totaling $187,000 over 2 years. Vanco Consulting, Vanessa's company. My husband had been funneling nearly $200,000 of restaurant money to his mistress through fake consulting fees. I also found the original partnership agreement from 1986. Both are signatures, equal partners, Helen Dalton and Frank Dalton, each owning 50% of Helen and Frank's Restaurant LLC. He'd filed amended papers in 1993, removing my name, telling me it was for insurance purposes. I'd trusted him. I'd signed whatever he put in front of me because that's what you did when you loved someone. The morning after I signed away everything for $1, I called a new lawyer. Not Patricia. I needed someone who didn't think I was falling apart. Raymond Cross was 62 years old with a boxer's build and a reputation for taking cases other lawyers called hopeless. My son David had found him through a friend who'd been through a brutal business dispute. Mr. Cross, I have original partnership documents proving 50% ownership of a restaurant my husband claims he built alone. I also have evidence of health code violations, embezzlement through fake consulting fees, and food safety fraud. And yesterday I signed everything over to him for $1. The line went quiet for 5 seconds. Can you be in my office at 9 tomorrow morning? Raymond spent 2 hours going through my files. He didn't speak for the first 45 minutes. Just read, made notes, and occasionally let out a low whistle. Mrs. Dalton, he finally said, leaning back, do you know what you've done? Made the worst decision of my life? No, ma'am. You've set the perfect trap. You signed under duress, without adequate legal counsel, and without any disclosure of the business's true financial condition, including $187,000 in fraudulent consulting payments and 14 health code violations your husband concealed from you. That sale agreement isn't worth the paper it's printed on. He tapped the partnership document from 1986. And this is gold. You were a legal co-owner. He removed your name without proper consent or compensation. In Georgia, that's fraud. He smiled for the first time. Your husband thinks he just got the deal of a lifetime. He's about to find out it's the worst deal he ever made. Raymond moved fast. Within 48 hours, he'd filed a motion to void the $1 sale, a petition for forensic accounting of the restaurant's finances, and a formal complaint to the Georgia Department of Public Health regarding the concealed violations. He also did something I didn't expect. He hired a private investigator. 3 days later, the investigator's report landed on Raymond's desk, and Raymond called me in to see it. Mrs. Dalton, your husband's relationship with Vanessa Reed goes deeper than we thought. She doesn't just receive consulting fees. She's listed as a 20% owner of a new restaurant Frank is planning to open in Charleston. He registered the LLC 4 months ago, using funds from your restaurant. 4 months ago, while we were still married, while I was still cooking in that kitchen every day, he was planning a whole new life with her. How much? I asked. He's transferred approximately $312,000 into the new ventures account, all from Helen and Frank's operating funds. I felt dizzy. $312,000, siphoned from the restaurant I'd helped build with my own hands, while I stood over a hot stove 6 days a week, making the food that generated that money. Are you all right? Raymond asked. I'm furious, I said. Is that all right? He grinned. That's exactly right. The phone call from Frank came 2 days after Raymond filed the paperwork. Helen. His voice was tight, barely controlled. What the hell do you think you're doing? I'm exercising my legal rights, Frank. You signed the papers. You sold everything for $1. It's done. My lawyer disagrees. Apparently, when you hide $187,000 in fake consulting fees and $300,000 in secret business ventures, the sale isn't exactly valid. Silence. And Frank? The health department is very interested in those 14 violations you've been hiding. More silence. Then his voice dropped to something cold and unfamiliar. You're going to regret this, Helen. I promise you that. The only thing I regret is not checking those files sooner. I hung up. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. From something that felt like electricity. The next 2 weeks were chaos. Frank's lawyer filed motion after motion, trying to block the forensic accounting. Raymond swatted them down like flies. The health department sent an inspector to the restaurant unannounced. I heard later that they found expired chicken in the walk-in, mouse droppings in the dry storage, and refrigeration units running 8 degrees above safe temperature. The restaurant was shut down immediately for 30 days pending remediation. Frank was hemorrhaging money. No restaurant income, legal fees mounting, and the bank calling about the loan he'd taken for the Charleston venture. Then Vanessa showed up at my apartment. She was standing by her car when I came back from grocery shopping. Tall, polished, wearing sunglasses that cost more than my monthly rent. Mrs. Dalton, we need to talk. I don't think we do. Please. She took off her sunglasses, and I was surprised to see she looked tired. Scared, even. You're destroying Frank's life. Our life. The restaurant is closed. The Charleston project is frozen. And he can't access his accounts because of your lawyer's freeze order. His accounts, I said calmly. You mean the accounts funded by the restaurant I co-founded and co-owned for 38 years? He built that restaurant. We built it. I created every recipe, on that menu. I trained every cook who ever worked that kitchen. I showed up at 4 in the morning to prep and didn't leave until 10 at night. For 38 years, what did you contribute in 2 years besides fake invoices? She flinched like I'd slapped her. I'm not going away, she said, but her voice wavered. Frank and I love each other. Then you should have let him divorce me honestly. Instead, he tried to rob me and hide you in the accounting. I went inside and closed the door. Through the window, I watched her sit in her car for 10 minutes before driving away. My children rallied around me. David, my son, flew in from Atlanta. My daughter Karen came from Nashville. They sat in my little apartment and listened to everything. Mom, David said, his jaw tight. I remember helping you in that kitchen when I was 12 years old. Peeling potatoes, washing dishes. Dad was always in the front schmoozing customers. You were the one who made that restaurant what it was. Karen squeezed my hand. We'll testify. Whatever you need. David had done something else. He'd tracked down Donna, our longtime waitress who Frank had fired 6 months earlier, supposedly for being too old for the new image Vanessa wanted. Donna was livid and ready to talk. How he'd paid Vanessa's company for consulting that amounted to her showing up twice a month for an hour. How he'd told the staff to lie to health inspectors. The trial began in April. Savannah was already warm, the azaleas in full bloom outside the courthouse. I wore a simple blue dress and sat beside Raymond, feeling strangely calm. Frank looked diminished. He'd lost weight, and his suit hung loosely. Vanessa sat in the gallery, trying to look supportive. But I noticed she kept checking her phone. Frank's lawyer, a slick man named Gerald Harmon, painted a picture of Frank as a visionary entrepreneur whose wife was a bitter ex trying to cash in on his success. Mrs. Dalton was a wonderful cook, Gerald said. But cooking and running a business are very different things. She had no role in the financial management, strategic growth, or business development of the restaurant. Then Raymond stood up. Your Honor, the evidence will show that Helen Dalton wasn't just a cook. She was the co-founder, co-owner, and operational backbone of a restaurant that earned its reputation entirely on the food she created and the kitchen she managed. The evidence will further show that Frank Dalton systematically erased her contributions, embezzled over $300,000 to fund a secret business with his mistress, and concealed health code violations that endangered the public. The trial lasted 6 days. Raymond was methodical and devastating. He presented the 1,986 partnership agreement. He showed tax returns from 1,986 through 2004, where the restaurant income was reported jointly. He produced letters Frank had written to the Savannah Chamber of Commerce, referring to my wife and partner Helen and our shared vision for the restaurant. Donna testified for 2 hours. She described how I'd arrive before dawn and leave after dark, how I'd personally trained every cook, how customers came specifically for my food. She ran that kitchen like a general, Donna said. Frank couldn't boil water. Everyone in that restaurant knew Helen was the reason people kept coming back. 3 other former employees confirmed her testimony. Then came the forensic accountant, a meticulous man named Arthur Webb. He walked the judge through Frank's financial manipulation with devastating clarity. Over a 30-month period, Mr. Dalton diverted approximately $312,000 to a new business venture with Miss Vanessa Reed, he testified. Additionally, he paid Miss Reed's company $187,000 in consulting fees for services that, based on our analysis, were never meaningfully rendered. He also manipulated ingredient cost records, overstating expenses by approximately $45,000 per year and pocketing the difference. The total amount diverted from the restaurant? Raymond asked. Approximately $544,000 over 3 years. The courtroom went silent. I watched Frank grip the edge of the table until his knuckles turned white. When Frank took the stand, he tried to be charming. It had always worked for him before. He smiled at the judge, a veteran named Robert Calloway, and spoke confidently about his vision for the business. Raymond's cross-examination stripped that confidence away in minutes. "Mr. Dalton, you testified that your wife was merely a cook, with no business involvement. Can you explain this letter you wrote in 1989 to your bank requesting a loan expansion? Please read the underlined portion." Frank's eyes darted to his lawyer. He cleared his throat. "It says, my wife Helen and I have grown this business together over the past 3 years, and her management of kitchen operations has been essential to our success." "Essential," Raymond repeated. "Not minimal. Not insignificant. Essential. Your word, Mr. Dalton. That was just a loan application. You exaggerate on those. So you're telling this court you committed bank fraud by misrepresenting your wife's role to secure favorable lending terms?" Frank's mouth opened and closed. His lawyer objected, but the damage was done. Raymond pressed harder. "Mr. Dalton, Vanco Consulting LLC, owned by Vanessa Reed, billed your restaurant $187,000. Can you describe the consulting services provided? She helped modernize our brand and menu strategy. Can you provide any written deliverables, reports, strategy documents, brand guidelines? They were mostly verbal consultations. $187,000 in verbal consultations." Raymond paused. "And Miss Reed happens to be the woman you left your wife for. Is that correct?" Frank said nothing. When Vanessa testified, she tried to maintain composure. She described her consulting work with rehearsed precision. Then Raymond showed her an email she'd sent to a friend, recovered during discovery. "Can you read this email you sent to a friend named Diane last September?" Her face went pale. She looked at Frank. He stared at the table. "It says..." She swallowed. "Frank is paying me a fortune for basically showing up once a month and picking new napkin colors, LOL. Best gig ever. And the Charleston restaurant is going to be amazing, all funded by his clueless wife's cooking." "Clueless wife's cooking," Raymond repeated. "The cooking that generated every dollar your so-called consulting fees came from." Vanessa started crying. The judge's expression was stone. Judge Calloway delivered his ruling on a Thursday afternoon. The courtroom was full. My children sat directly behind me. Donna was there, along with half a dozen former employees and several regular customers who'd heard about the trial. "This case," Judge Calloway began, "represents one of the most egregious examples of marital fraud and financial misconduct I have seen in 25 years on the bench." Frank sat rigid. Vanessa was not in the courtroom. I'd heard she hadn't shown up that morning. The evidence overwhelmingly establishes that Helen Dalton was an equal co-founder and essential partner in the restaurant's operation for 38 years. Mr. Dalton's systematic erasure of her contributions, beginning with the unauthorized removal of her name from the partnership in 1993, constitutes clear fraud. The judge's voice hardened. Furthermore, Mr. Dalton embezzled over $500,000 from the marital business to fund a secret venture and an extramarital relationship. He concealed health code violations that endangered the public. He lied to this court about the nature of payments to his mistress. And he attempted to dispose of his wife's rightful share of marital property for $1 through a transaction obtained without proper disclosure. He looked directly at Frank. "I am ruling as follows. First, the restaurant, Helen and Frank's, is declared marital property. Missus Dalton is entitled to 50% of its appraised value, which I'm setting at $1.8 million based on the independent appraisal. That's $900,000. Gerald leaned toward Frank, whispering urgently. Second, Mr. Dalton must reimburse the marital estate for the $544,000 he diverted. That amount is added to Mrs. Dalton's settlement. I felt Raymond's hand briefly touch my arm in reassurance. Third, the marital home, valued at $600,000, is awarded entirely to Mrs. Dalton as compensation for Mr. Dalton's fraud and waste of marital assets. Fourth, Mr. Dalton will pay all of Mrs. Dalton's legal fees, totaling approximately $140,000. Fifth, I'm referring the evidence of financial fraud to the appropriate state and federal authorities for further investigation, including potential tax evasion related to unreported income and the concealment of the Charleston venture. Frank half rose from his chair. Your Honor, I can't. You can and you will, Mr. Dalton. The judge reviewed his notes one final time. Total marital assets are valued at approximately $3.2 million. Given the severity of Mr. Dalton's misconduct, I'm awarding Mrs. Dalton $2.3 million, approximately 72%. This court does not look favorably on liars. And Mr. Dalton, you have lied at every stage of these proceedings. He looked at me. Mrs. Dalton, your meticulous record-keeping was the foundation of this case. 38 years of documents preserved the truth when your husband tried to destroy it. This court commends your diligence. Thank you, Your Honor, I said, and my voice only cracked a little. The gavel came down. Karen and David rushed forward, wrapping me in their arms. Donna was crying and laughing at the same time. Raymond shook hands with half the courtroom. I looked across at Frank. He sat motionless while Gerald packed up files around him. Our eyes met for just a moment. I expected to feel something. Anger, satisfaction, grief. But there was just quiet, like the silence after a storm passes. That evening, Raymond called. Helen, I have news. Frank's investors in the Charleston project want to talk to you. With the restaurant shut down and Frank's assets frozen, they're looking for someone to take over the Savannah location. They're offering to buy Frank out and bring you in as managing partner. I almost dropped the phone. They want me? They did their homework. They talked to Donna, to former employees, to suppliers. Everyone said the same thing. Helen Dalton is the restaurant. They want you to reopen it under your name. I stood in my tiny apartment kitchen and started to laugh. Then I started to cry. Then I laughed again. Tell them I'm interested, I said. 8 months later, I stood in the kitchen of my restaurant. Not Helen and Frank's anymore. Just Helen's. New sign out front. Same address on Main Street. Same peach cobbler recipe. I'd rehired Donna and 3 other employees Frank had let go. I'd updated the equipment, fixed every health code issue, and deep cleaned the place until it shone. David had helped me design a new menu that honored our classics while adding some modern touches. Karen had driven down from Nashville for opening weekend. Even Donna's granddaughter was working as a hostess. The line was out the door on opening night. Mom, you look happy, Karen said, catching me between the dining room and the kitchen. Like, actually happy. I am actually happy, I told her. For the first time in years, I'd heard about Frank through the kids. They still saw him occasionally, and I never interfered with that. The state investigation had found significant tax irregularities. He owed back taxes and penalties that wiped out what little he had left after the settlement. The Charleston restaurant never opened. Vanessa left him within 2 months of the verdict, took a job in Miami, and never looked back. Frank was living in a small rental near the highway, working part-time at an auto parts store. My children said he looked 10 years older. I felt sorry for him, honestly. Not the deep, aching sorrow of lost love, but the detached sadness you feel for someone who destroyed their own life through greed and selfishness. He'd had everything: a family who loved him, a successful business, a partner who would have stood beside him until the very end. He threw it all away for a 31-year-old smile and the thrill of thinking he could outsmart everyone. One morning, about a year after the trial, I was prepping in the kitchen before dawn when there was a knock on the back door. I opened it and found Frank standing there. He looked small in the gray morning light, older, beaten down. "Helen," he said. "Frank, can I come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. He walked into the kitchen he'd worked in for nearly 4 decades and looked around at the changes I'd made. New stainless steel counters, better ventilation, a proper walk-in cooler that actually held temperature. "Place looks good," he said quietly. "Thank you." He stood there awkwardly, hands in his pockets. "I came to apologize," he said finally. "Not because my lawyer told me to, not because I want anything, just because I owe you the truth." I waited. "You were always the heart of this place. I knew it every single day, and I resented it. People came for your food, not my smile. The business worked because of your talent, not my management. And instead of being grateful, I got jealous. Then I got stupid." His voice cracked. "I'm sorry, Helen, for all of it." I looked at this man I'd spent most of my life with. I didn't hate him. I didn't love him. He was just a person who'd made terrible choices and was living with the consequences. "Thank you for saying that, Frank," I said. "I mean it. But it doesn't change anything." "I know," he whispered. He left through the back door, and I went back to prepping the morning biscuits. That was 6 months ago. Today, Helen's is busier than the restaurant ever was under both our names. I've been featured in Savannah's local magazine. I was nominated for a Community Business Award. I started a small scholarship fund for women over 50 who want to attend culinary school. I'm 68 years old, and I've never been more alive. People ask me if I'd do anything differently. I tell them the same thing every time. I'd keep better records. I'd insist my name stayed on every document. I'd trust my instincts when something felt wrong. And I'd never, ever let someone convince me that my work didn't matter just because they held the pen that signed the checks. My filing cabinet saved my life. 38 years of paper. And every single page mattered in the end. Here's what I want every woman listening to know. Your contributions are real. Your work has value. Whether you're cooking in a kitchen, raising children, balancing books, or holding a family together, you are building something. And nobody has the right to erase that. If you're in a situation where someone is telling you that you don't deserve what you've earned, fight. Fight with records. Fight with lawyers. Fight with the truth. Because the truth has a way of coming out, even when someone spends years trying to bury it. I sold my husband everything I owned for $1. And it was the best investment I ever made. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have signed those papers? Tell me in the comments. And if this story meant something to you, please subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. You never know whose life a story might change. Thank you for listening. This is Helen from Savannah, Georgia. And I promise you, it is never too late to start over.